Okay. They've caused disruption in Parliament, staging a near-naked protest from the gallery in the Commons. And now the rest of London should prepare for some serious disruption on the capital's busy roads. Extinction Rebellion, which is an environmental action group, is starting 2 weeks of protests in London. And joining me now, David Barrows, who's a musician donating all proceeds from his album to the group, and Marijn Vandegeer, she's director of Resolution Possible, which aims to make people aware of the consequences of the consumer choices they make. And she also campaigns for Extinction Rebellion. Good morning to you both. Thanks so much for coming in. Do you think this is a good thing, this 2 weeks, David?
The protests?
Yeah.
I do think it's a good thing. I think the government needs to be held to account for their lack of attention to climate change, and I think it's an existential threat to our species.
Marijn, what do you think?
I completely agree with David. We're in an emergency now. It's all hands on deck. We need to start really worrying about this. I know there's a lot of criticism about our methodology, but we feel it's justified if you look at how serious the situation is. We're aware that there are things that the government is doing, but it's by no means good enough. I mean, frankly, it's a joke compared to what we're facing. So this is, we've all signed petitions and been on protest marches and done everything we can. Nothing has worked. So here we are.
Let's talk about your methodology. Disrupting London at major junctions for 2 weeks. How is that going to help, do you think?
So what we really want is for people, the disruption is initially going to be annoying for people, and we're aware of that, and we apologise big time for that, because we don't want to be disrupting people going about their day. But we feel it's the only way that it's going to have an impact. A few weeks ago, we saw this massive protest about Brexit, but then everybody went back home and carried on with their lives. With climate change and biodiversity loss that we're facing now, going back home and going about our days isn't an option anymore. We have 12 years, and this is according to the IPCC. We think that is extremely conservative. We actually think that we have a lot less time than that. And the disruption we're going to be causing is very much proportional to what we're facing.
But will it affect change?
So what we're hoping is that we're going to be hitting the government where it hurts the most economically. It's going to cost a lot of money, what we're going to be doing, and we're hoping that that is finally going to get them to say, right, okay, this is now a problem. We feel that anything else isn't affecting them as much. So, and we are talking to several MPs who are very much interested in what we have to say, but the political will simply isn't there, and we're really trying to push for that to change now.
Because reading that intro and describing your group, Resolution Possible, and how you work to make consumers aware of the choices that they make.
Yes.
That, it could be argued, is a more effective way of affecting change than disrupting the streets of London.
It is a very good, obviously it's my own company, so I would say that it is a good way, but we've now kind of passed that point. That would have been fine sort of 10, 20 years ago, where we're all slowly starting to adjust our lifestyles. This is an emergency where we have a few years, that's it. So we don't really have the time anymore now to start, becoming more aware of it now, and it's slowly changing.
Well, let's use an example, and David, jump in here. The semi-naked protest in Parliament, right? Everyone was talking about it, but what were they talking about? They were talking about naked people in Parliament. They weren't talking about the environment. And what have they done since then? Have they affected any policies or brought in any policies?
So I think all of this is meant to draw attention to the problem, and this record I've made here, The Species That Knew Too Much, is essentially about the existential threats that we face from climate change and biodiversity loss. The science is very clear on this. We are going to go extinct if we don't radically transform our economy. And the only way to do that is through a World War II style mobilization that is all, as Marijn says, all hands on deck. And this needs to come from Western governments, Eastern governments. It needs to be an international coalition to address the climate change and biodiversity loss problem. Otherwise, if you think you've got a refugee problem now, just wait until the seas rise by 6 feet, which is projected in the next couple of decades.
I want to just bring it back to a personal level. What do you guys do in your everyday life that you think other people should adopt?
So, I mean, I'm going to say straight away that I do cheat sometimes because I love cheese, but I've gone vegan. For example, I am going to, my main aim is to try and reduce flying. I used to fly to my home in the Netherlands all the time, which is insane. So, you know, now I've switched to taking the train. It's little things like that, but again, which I encourage everyone to do, and it becomes quite addictive actually, because you feel quite good about yourself, and then you know, you're like, oh, what else can I do? But it obviously needs to be systemic change. There needs to be law. There needs to be policy that these things happen. You know, the government is saying it's doing things, but their actions are directly contradicting that. You know, they voted for Heathrow expansion, which means more planes in the sky, which is a nightmare. You know, they've pushed through fracking. You know, there's 30 billion pounds for roads, and I think it's about 20 times less than that they're going to spend on trees. You know, they're saying one thing, they're doing the total opposite.
Okay, David, what do you do in your personal life?
I have cut down on meat consumption, and I take public transport, and I'm trying to essentially cut down on my use of fossil fuel, which is really the problem. And the radical transformation I was referring to means we need to get off combustion engines and fossil fuel. That's a tall order because there are powerful interests who are well vested in those technologies, but those technologies are obsolete as the CD player. So we need to get off of them.
Okay, I have to say, I've got one of your songs in my mind for 4 hours now, so thank you very much.
Oh, well, very good. I'm glad to hear that. Earworms, what we want.
Okay, David and Marijn, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.